In the course of your spiritual path, not everyone supports you and not everyone approves. This full moon is in PURVA PHALGUNI Nakshatra, and a really well-known native is Madonna. Madonna was not this blank canvas waiting for somebody to show her what to be. She was a woman with a vision, and what her vision was, what her creativity was, evolved over time, but she was the one with the vision. She was the one with the creativity. She was the one with the hard work. She was also the one who never stopped to ask people what they thought. She wasn't concerned if people liked her or agreed with what she was doing or how was she doing in the polls. She wasn't really concerned with public opinion. She had a vision and she realized that creative vision. So she is this epitome of creative force energy. Now, Phalguni means the pink fleshy parts of a woman. So this nakshatra is very much about sex, and sex is creativity. Sexual energy is creative energy. The two are not separate. The nakshatra is in Leo. All of these elements are encompassed in the 5th house. So anytime you are creating something, it's with this sexual energy. Now let's think about it for a minute in your own life. Esoterically, sex is not something that is stigmatized as it is in many cultures. So let's apply that principle in our own lives. While the words are very easy to say, be yourself, express yourself, be who you want to be, there are consequences to being who you want to be, especially if you are on a spiritual path, especially if you have some sense of purpose in the world, especially if you walk with direction and know that the endeavors you undertake have some more significant purpose. So what you are creating, not everybody sees it. Actually, nobody sees it. Only you see it. Other people can get pieces of it and maybe get an idea of what you're doing if they are so inclined to think that way. But you can't ever count on anybody to know what you're doing. So what happens is somebody will step in without knowing what the big picture looks like, without really knowing what you're creating, and they just pick apart the little things that you do. They pick apart the little pieces of how you do things. They see sections of your work and critique those sections, but they don't see the whole of your work. Only you see the whole of your work. So again, while it seems very easy to say, oh, just be yourself, walk with your purpose, there are consequences. If you have people around you who, for example, have different religious views or different spiritual views, sometimes you're ostracized, sometimes you're considered evil, sometimes you're considered bad, there are consequences. If you have questions about what's going on, and for example, you go to see a mental health professional, and they don't know what you're talking about because they don't see the esoteric world, they don't have the abilities you have, they don't have the sight that you have, they'll look at you like you're crazy, and then that doesn't help at all. Or if you talk to just a regular person who doesn't have what you have, they don't see what you see, and they don't have the capacity to understand what you're talking about. What happens is that each time we encounter those situations, even though you know better, but still it chips away at you little by little by little. So it's not the grand sense of purpose, it's these little things, it's these small pebbles in your shoe that make the walk harder, that make the journey harder. But all of these parts that other people think are weird, that other people don't understand, but these parts that are actually the most interesting part of you, if you could talk about anything, this is what you would talk about. Keep developing those parts. Keep developing those parts. And it doesn't matter what anybody else says. Keep developing those parts because they are your most interesting parts. What you're curious about, this is what cures you. What you have the eye to see, the truth as you understand it, your perspective, that is what makes you your unique self. And nobody can see that but you. That means nobody else has that to offer to the world except you. So when these times come, when these small incisions of doubt come at you, you remember only you see what you see. And the fact that you see it, it's very important to bring it into the world. And that's what this nakshatra is about. The moon is in PURVA PHALGUNI Nakshatra. Preceding that was Maga, the ancestors, and PURVA PHALGUNI is becoming immersed in another body. So you are out of the world and now you're in the world and creating. It's the power of positive procreation, actually the ability to create something. The symbols of it are a bed or a cot, a hammock, a platform. So what's associated with it is, think a platform, a guru, somebody teaching on a platform. So knowledge, and then the bed, a resting place. So a place temporarily where knowledge comes into the world and has a place to be expressed, but for now is resting. This energy also has to do with purging and releasing, because when something new comes in, we have to have let something else go. So these past few months, where we've been working on these changing situations and deciding what stays, what serves our highest purpose, what serves our path versus what impedes our path, we're making these changes. And we're looking at our relationships, and we're looking at our livelihoods, and we're looking at our pastimes, and we're looking at our friends, and deciding what's there versus what should go. Everything that you've released, everything that you've calmly closed the door on, has made room for now this creative energy from above. This nakshatra is also about divine partnership. So it's something from above that the individual is trying to merge with. It's the soul being let loose in the material world to gather knowledge, and then looking at who we partner with, how we partner with ourselves, and are we working with ourselves or against ourselves? So the lunar period of these next 2 weeks is this place of rest and acknowledging what's now come into your life, what resources you have available to you, and looking at what your soul is here to do. Creative energy is sexual energy. So for a minute, let's consider the tie between nudity and knowledge. Think of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, that story. Adam and Eve were naked. That wasn't the problem. The problem is when they became aware of the fact that they were naked. So it wasn't the nudity itself, it was awareness of it. We are made to feel so ashamed of our sex, of our body, of our physical desires, our imaginative desires. There's barely a place you can look where someone's not trying to make you feel self-conscious because they're trying to also sell you a solution. It can take a lifetime just to get over not feeling self-conscious about your appearance or your body or what your utility is to the opposite sex, because we even conceptualize our own usefulness to how, especially as women, whether or not men find us attractive. Thus, like, if men find us sexually useful to them. So it's interesting, right? Like, that dynamic's not the problem, but calling attention to that dynamic, awareness, and then bringing to conscious awareness that we are aware that that's happening. That's the problem. That's when you become a feminist. That's when you become a loudmouth person. That's when you become problematic, when you start to make other people feel uncomfortable. And that has to do with people who are trying to use your energy and redirect your creative energy, your sexual energy, in a way that's useful to them. Whereas this nakshatra is having you bring it back to yourself and the knowledge of how powerful that is and what you can do if that energy is harnessed and directed in a productive way. Uranus is in the 4th house in this chart, and the 4th house is our place of origin, our sense of home. It can either be the literal home or where we feel at home. And the fact that Uranus is present in the 4th house in this chart is indicating that how we feel about home is going to change. The setup alone of this chart is very telling. The first thing is what's called a bucket. So you have the moon, the handle, and then all of the other planets below. So you have the moon, your internal, your mentality, how you feel about things, your emotional state, casting light on all of the other elements. So how you're feeling about something, how you've been thinking about something, how you've been internally processing something. Now you're looking at that new mentality and you're looking at all of the areas of your life that you've been processing this information. The other thing, right? So the moon is in the 8th house and the sun is in the 2nd. So the 2-8 axis is the same axis that the eclipses were on back in December. The 2nd house has to deal with esteem. It also has to deal with our stuff, the money you make from the work that you do, but your esteem, reinforced by the stuff you have to speak for you. That's opposed to where the moon is now in the 8th house, and the 8th house is about alchemy and transformation and going deep. Your most vulnerable self is the 8th house. So when you're done with your transit in the 8th house, it's a different type of self-esteem. It's a self-esteem that's invisible. So whereas the 2nd house is your stuff, but you have something to show for it, and that's how you derive your esteem, 8th house is something different. So it's the esteem you get from the spiritual work that you've done, but on the exterior, you don't have anything tangible to show for it. So consider how that shows up in the world. how we consider somebody who has done well. You have cool stuff. You have a nice house. You have a good income. You've got a cool car. You've got nice clothes. You can go places. You have stuff. So your stuff somehow speaks for you. And the way we get wrapped up in that is very subtle. How you get to see what you're really about is after that 8th house action. When you come out the other side of your 8th house, the strength that you have is internal. It's a spiritual strength that you've had. So that's what this new moon is. Moon is in the 8th house, so you're going through something internal. Any growth you have that happens internally, nobody gives you a paycheck for that. So if it feels like thankless work, that's because socially it's not something that's particularly valued. The aspects for this chart are very interesting too. You have Saturn square Uranus as a feature. So Saturn, structure, coming up against Uranus, disruptions. So disruptions in your structure. Pluto is trining Mars. Pluto, looking underneath things. And then Mars, what are you going to do about it? So now that you have this truth, what are you going to do about it? Moon, trining Uranus. Trine means that this is just a very natural energy flow. So you are now in the mood to do something unexpected. Scorpio, sun, moon, and rising. This full moon takes place in your 10th house of public reputation, your career, your mastery in the world, how you present yourself to a larger public. And it's opposed to the sun in the 4th house. So what this is having you look at is, what is your relationship like with your public self and with your private self? You out in the world, who you profess to be, and the relationships you have in the public world. Are those congruent with you, who you are as a person? And here's why it matters, is because in a worldly sense, the relationships we have are in a professional setting are seen as largely utilitarian. And regardless of what it says on LinkedIn about nice people, maybe, maybe not. You have professional relationships to advance in your profession. That's utilitarian. That's not your associations by choice. It's not who you like to hang out with. It's who will get you someplace. So who you do business with is generally who's going to help you in your profession. Now, taking this into a spiritual sense, about if you think about your work in the world, what you are creating in the world, if it's through your regular worldly profession, you're going to have associates who will help you do that. If it is in a creative spiritual set, if what you are bringing into the world is in a creative spiritual sense, you may need different colleagues. You may need different relationships, because what people do in a worldly sense is not the same as what people do in a spiritual sense. The outcomes are different. The goals are different. So who might help you make money is not the same person with who would be the best person to align with for spiritual endeavors. So, all right. So let's look at that as a comparison. If you were in a workplace where your supervisor, your boss, your manager, you're very supported and you feel really comfortable, and your colleagues, you don't have any problems with them, everything is good. Your production is higher. This is research-based, not making it up. And if you were in a toxic working relationship with your coworkers, if you have a boss who bullies you, if you have situations that are like feeling like they're out of your control, but if you have a lot of conflict at work and your production is not the same, because conflict, bad situations, weird relationships, they take away your mental energy. They take it away, they redirect it. So rather than you being able to use all of your mental energy for something productive, say like 70% of it shifted over here because you have to worry about what's going to happen because the situation's not good. So it happens the same way if you are on a spiritual path, or if you have some work that you're trying to do in the world that is for a higher purpose. Not everybody is a good fit for a partnership with that. Who will be a good fit is somebody who understands, or even if they don't understand, they support you. They don't judge you. They don't it's not a relationship where you are depleted. You're working with the same set of rules. You treat each other with respect, but you have a mutual conduct. You have a way that you have agreed that you're going to interact. If you don't have that, that's not a healthy relationship. And because you'll be close to it, because you're, regardless of what it looks like in a public sense, you're the one who's close to it. You know how it feels. You know what it actually does to you. So whatever your relationships are like in a public sense, you can fool anybody, but you know for real. And you take that home with you. Because what you're putting out in the world, that is you. They're not separate, they're together. And that's what the full moon is shedding a light on, is are the people you associate with, are they aligned with what you're doing? Are you in good relationship with other people? Thus, are you in good relationship with yourself, right? So out in the world and in your private self. Now, Pluto, the planet of transformation, is transiting your second house, and your second house is your house of esteem. It's also your house of earned income, the stuff that you get as a result of the work that you do. So in a tangible way, it has to, like, your esteem based on what you've earned, and then in an intangible way, your actual esteem, how you feel about yourself. So Pluto's been looking at that. Don't worry, it's over. But Pluto's been looking at that, and so with what you've seen about how you derive your esteem, there's going to be some action now in your seventh house concerning your partnerships and your close one-on-one relationships. So you can always tell you how you feel about yourself by who's around you, by who you let around you by choice. And so this is, don't be alarmed, it's a trine, so it's nice energy. But based on what you've learned about yourself and your esteem, you're going to make some action considering you're going to make some action over here with your partners based on how you feel about yourself. But it will come very naturally, and it will feel like a natural flow, like a progression that is meant to be. So Uranus is also in your seventh house. So something unexpected is going to happen with relationships. And it is in the square with Saturn for you, and the Saturn is in your third house. So your third house has to do with the way that you think, communicate, how you take in information, your community, what's close to home, your short distance travel, your siblings. So how you, like in a Saturnian way, like how you conceptualize those things and what your relationship is with with those things that are close to you. There will be some tension with your third house and how you have your third house item structured. And Uranus, something unexpected is going to happen in your seventh house. So how you work with a square is, first of all, be aware that the tension exists. And then the second thing is whatever happens that's unexpected, like nothing is inherently good or bad. It just happens. But the good or bad part is, or the harmonious or discordant thing is how you deal with it. So be aware that there's this tension between third house and seventh house, your siblings, the things close to you, and your partnerships. And then when it happens, look at how you can integrate whatever has occurred, whatever has come to pass. Now, the sun is trining Uranus, so that means there's an opportunity there. And, the sun is sextiling Uranus, which means that there's an opportunity. And the moon is trining Uranus, which means you feel good about it. So everything, these are harmonious aspects. So there will be a surprise, but you feel good about it, and you have an opportunity to do something useful with it. But be very cognizant of the relationship of you, your private self, and you, your public self, and the relationships you have in private and the relationships you have in public. Have you noticed that the places you once were are not the places you can be anymore? Where you've come from, that ground is burned behind you. Who you used to know, not only do they not do it for you anymore, but you physically have a hard time being around them. Energetically, it just doesn't fit anymore. It's just not a match anymore. But more than intellectually challenging, it's actually physically challenging. It's energetically challenging. Socially, that's very awkward because you don't fit in. You fit in fewer and fewer places. But in a spiritual sense, this is good news because it means you're growing. So it means the clearing out. And then the people you're going to meet, you're now making room for them, and they are an energetic match. Maybe they're not doing exactly what you are doing, but you guys are headed in the same direction. And you'll find more people who are headed in a similar direction. This is growth. So here's how to use the energy for the next couple weeks. PURVA PHALGUNI is the coming together of things. So the feminine aspect from above and the masculine aspect, the material aspect from below. You're bringing them together. And this nakshatra is a place where the knowledge finds temporary rest and is regrouping and deciding what to do. So you have Kama, the purpose, the desire to create something. You have Venus, the ruler, who imparts wisdom and counsel and advice. And you have Vishnu, the deity, which is about the preservation of what is coming into being. So presently, we're at a place where your soul is finding rest before you begin the next stages of your journey. So what you can do in this time, pull your resources together, right? If you haven't watched the last video of the new moon, watch it. Along your path, when things weren't going how you thought they should go, you learned a lot of other things. You encountered a lot of other people. You maybe worked at different jobs. You learned different trades. You maybe developed abilities. You met people who taught you things. You had time to read things. You had time to learn things. But what your knowledge looks like now, what your experience looks like now, is far more advanced than probably what you think it is. Because what you learn when things aren't going how you think, that's its own university. So you pull your resources together. Who do you know now? What do you know now? How can you apply it now? And you start to plan your next moves. And then the second element of this is that service is based on friendship and trust. So who's around you? Who can help you move in the direction you're moving? Who can you trust? It's odd too, as you start to enter into these things, people you've known forever or for a long time, they don't know what you're talking about. And then you can meet somebody who is a perfect stranger and you fall right into that conversation because you speak the same language. So we're looking at who's not an energetic or spiritual fit for you and who is an energetic or spiritual fit for you to enhance your ability to bring your creative expression into the world. So for right now, pull your resources together, integrate all of the experiences you've come through, and appreciate how difficult your journey's been and how far you've come and all of the things you know now. It's not a small thing. So take inventory, integrate, consider your partnerships, and rest.